I'm a bit late to the party, but the latest film in the Kung Fu Panda franchise, Kung Fu Panda 4, has dropped in theaters last week, and I was able to go see it yesterday. So here are my thoughts on it. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I talk about a bunch of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share what you thought of Kung Fu Panda 4, and if you enjoy the Kung Fu Panda franchise in general. Click the like button and be sure to subscribe because that really does help a lot. And over on my channel, I have done more movie reviews like this. Check those out once this video is over. As for me, as a point of reference when it comes to this movie, I went into Kung Fu Panda 4 very, very excited. I'm a big fan of the Kung Fu Panda franchise. I grew up watching all three of these movies when I was a kid. I actually saw Kung Fu Panda 3 in the theater. That's one of the first movies that I remember seeing in the theater. And so, yeah, I have tons and tons of nostalgia when it comes to this franchise, and I really enjoyed rewatching through them in preparation for this film. But what did I think of the new installment in this franchise? With that said, let's get started talking about the good. And I think that this movie still has a bunch of the charm of the first three Kung Fu Panda movies. At times, as a children's movie, as a new film in this franchise, I think it can be really funny all throughout it. It still has Poe's energetic charm to it all throughout it from beginning to end. And I think that's the best thing about this movie is its charming set of fun hijinks, funny moments, and those are present throughout the entire film. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. And that's what kind of, to me, elevated this movie more than I think that, like, if you removed that, I probably would have liked it a little bit less, and so therefore I think that's the best thing about the film. And I did really like the dynamic between Poe and Awkwafina's character Zen. Now, obviously, I do not think that their dynamic is as good as Poe's dynamic with the Furious Five, but I do think that the dynamic between these two characters works well enough in this context. Add to that, you just get a fun little quest that they go on in order to defeat this villain called the Chameleon, which we'll get into more of her later on in this video, but I enjoyed those aspects of it. And I kind of like that, I guess I kind of like that the film decides to take the franchise in a different direction. It's not just him being the Dragon Warrior, it's actually about him retiring from being the Dragon Warrior and trying to choose a successor. So he's trying to choose the next person as the Dragon Warrior, and so I appreciate that they're trying to do something different here with the material in this franchise that they are given. And so that was kind of nice that they're doing something a little bit different. But this is a film that overall, for me, didn't particularly work as a whole, so let's particularly move on to the bad. And like I previously mentioned, this movie can be really fun, entertaining, and watchable from beginning to end. And it has all the charm of Poe and even the side characters in it. What it didn't have was a good enough story to justify continuing this franchise, especially since the third film kind of ended on a high note with Poe mastering Chi and training every single Kung Fu master in the Valley of Peace to train and use their Chi, which is like one of the highest levels of Kung Fu in this franchise. I thought that was kind of a nice ending to this trilogy, but this film didn't have a good enough story to justify its existence on why we should be continuing the Kung Fu Panda franchise, and so therefore it just feels like this tacked on thing at the end of the third film, which I thought closed things out quite well. And add to that what this there are several things that really sabotaged this film. They removed the Furious Five. I was already skeptical going into that, and part of the reason why Kung Fu Panda 3, while still being very good, was my least favorite of the first three films, is because they kind of sidelined our Furious Five, and I felt their absence. And the reason Kung Fu Panda 2 is my favorite of the franchise is because it's one of the main reasons is because Poe is interacting with the Furious Five all throughout it, and they just have a fun dynamic and nice camaraderie with each other. And so once you remove that and replace them with a less interesting character in Zen, played by Aquafina, I think you remove some of the charm of the franchise a little bit. And I think the animation in general just looks a little bit cheaper. Like, I'm not trying to be too picky, but I thought the animation in this movie looks substantially cheaper than they did in the first 3 films. But it still looks good. I could have gotten past that if they had a story I actually cared about, but they didn't. The particular quest that our 2 main characters go on about going off and hunting down the chameleon, I didn't really care too much about. The chameleon herself as a villain, we gotta talk about our villain here, the chameleon, and with Tai Lung, Lord Shen, and Kai from the previous Kung Fu Panda movies, they had some personal motivation against somebody as to why they are doing evil. So you get Tai Lung, who is trained by Shifu, and he's out for revenge after not feeling worthy of being the Dragon Warrior. He's not worthy, and he felt that he should be, so he goes out for revenge. And that's a great example of, that's kind of what our 3 villains have been in this franchise. And here with the chameleon, she's fine, she's fun, I guess, but she lacks any sort of motivation that's reasonable for what she's doing. She's just a generic villain that wants power. And that's probably why I didn't care about the adventure the characters were on or anything like that, is because it just lacked any memorable villain as well. And also, the movie to me just doesn't really have a great logical ending. Now, if this were to be the end of the Kung Fu Panda franchise, with Po retiring from Dragon Warrior, the movie's about him trying to choose a successor. But then in this movie, what it decides to do is, it decides to flesh out some things between some of the characters in the entire movie, and then he chooses a successor at the end. But the person that he chose to be the new Dragon Warrior, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would you choose this person and not any of the trained masters of Kung Fu? He chose somebody he'd only known for like 2 or 3 days, according to me. And so, it just wasn't a very good ending to me. But the big thing that I think just sabotaged this movie is that the Kung Fu Panda movies, the first 3 of them, have had these emotional cores to them. So this is a silly franchise about animals doing kung fu, but they always have some sort of emotion. Like, the third one is about like him reconnecting with his father. The first one's about him like finding his place. And here, it just has none of that emotion. It doesn't have any of it. It just lacks any sort of big gigantic payoff or theme or anything. It just lacks that. And I think that's the big thing that I thought sabotaged this movie, was that if it had the emotional core that the first 3 had, I probably would have liked it a lot more. But here, it just kind of feels like they're running out of steam. And so, it's an entertaining film, but overall, I do not think I could recommend this film as a movie. But for all you families out there, if you're a parent and you're watching this, and you have young kids, they will definitely enjoy this movie, and you will have fun enjoying it with them. I had fun with it, but on a story plot level, and as somebody that grew up with the Kung Fu Panda franchise, I have to admit, I am a little bit disappointed with the way this movie turned out. So overall, I'm going to go C+ on this one, and the only reason it's not a C is because it's entirely watchable, but to me, it's not a very good movie. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Kung Fu Panda 4. Down below in the comment section, share what you thought of it over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out right now. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.